Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Uh, Tonight, I'd like to talk about something that happened in Epworth, one of the suburbs in Zimbabwe today. There was a lot of celebration there because ZANU PF was giving away the title deeds to the houses. This is a high density suburb in Harare, the capital city. This is a carryover from the Ian Smith days, the white colonial rule. Most blacks stayed in high density suburbs and they did not get title deeds to the houses. The rural areas was even worse. In fact, the rural areas were commonly known as communal areas where the land was owned communally and the chief, through the headman, were allocated what they called villages, and they administered those villages. And no one really owned any land there, not even the piece of land where your hut is built. So if you fell out of favor with the headman or the chief, you'll be asked to move, and you would have no choice but to move. The urban centers was the same thing. The Most people did not own the title deeds there. And it was very common later on. It became common for some of the areas for blacks to be able to buy the land and have title deeds. What is interesting here is that land is probably the one single most important property that most blacks would cherish right now. Forget the right to vote. Uh, Having title deeds would probably mean a lot to them. And this was in many ways encapsulated in the fight for land. Uh, yes, at the time, most people did not appreciate the importance of title deeds, but I think they appreciated the right to be able to say, no, this is my piece of land and I cannot be moved. Because one of the things that the Ian Smith regime used to do is designate an area as commercial farms. And the rural and the blacks living in that area could be moved without any compensation at all. Just the change of the designation was enough to move them. So many people were removed from their ancestral lands under that authority. And when people were saying they were fighting for the land, I think they were not fighting just for the land per se, they were also fighting for that right to be able to say, I own this piece of land, I own this property. So property rights to the ordinary Zimbabwean probably means a lot more than most of the other rights. And yet, here we are, 43 years after independence, even in the urban centers, where at least even the wise were beginning to give people title deeds. The SANU PF regime has been withholding that right. It is interesting also to note that one of Zimbabwe's leading economists, the late um, John Robertson, advised the Smith regime that giving people title deeds would actually open up the economy even greater prosperity because then people can use their title deeds to the land and the property that is on that land to actually get loans from the bank and thus be able to build their business that way. And he recommended it to Ian Smith to extend it to rural areas as well, not just urban centers, rural areas as well. Ian Smith rejected the suggestion purely for political reasons. He still wanted to be able to come to a piece of land and say, oh, we are going to build a road here, and the people who were living in that area would be moved without any compensation. And it also gave the whites the control over the blacks. And he refused it for purely those selfish political reasons. It is interesting to note that after independence, John Robertson actually made the same suggestion, submitted the same proposal to the late Gabriel Mugabe, and it was rejected for exactly the same reasons. Mugabe wanted to retain political control. One of the things that is happening in this 2023 election is how ZANU PF is going to frog march the rural voters to go and vote for ZANU PF. When the headmen, the chiefs, who have been bribed by the regime and are now nothing more than ZANU PF political commissars, can ask you to move if you if you do something that doesn't please them. That gives them enormous power over you. The rural people know, and in this particular case, NOPF has bribed the chiefs and the headmen and so forth. They know Kuti, those headmen, if they were to come to your house and say, oh, we are attending a party rally at such and such a place tomorrow, they don't need to say you must attend. You know you must attend because your failure to attend could get you into an, a lot of trouble with those headmen. And many people have been moved, forced to move. But some of it is remains at harassment more than moving people. If being accused of supporting the opposition is a serious crime, a serious political crime in Zimbabwe, that could get you into a lot of trouble. Even this occasion of this urban people getting title deeds This video, which was circulating today, showed the people wearing ZANU PF regalia, making it abundantly clear this is a ZANU PF organized event, and the people were posting that this is President Mnangagwa fulfilling his prophet, he promise to give people title deeds in Epworth. The individuals who get these title deeds know they get it on condition they vote for ZANU PF. Epworth being one of the urban constituencies is traditionally an opposition stronghold. And it will not be surprising at all that if the ZANU PF candidate should lose in that area, then all those people who have just been promised these title deeds may find the processes suddenly got very complicated. When ZANU PF seized the land, the farms, most of it went to the ruling elite. But even they got what we call a letter of offer. They did not get title deeds. And we all know that those letters of offer have been withdrawn. If, for whatever reason, the party is displeased with you. So these title deeds is nothing guaranteed in them because the party can find ways of harassing you and taking that property from you. It is tragic that the one property that most blacks would appreciate is now being used for political um, somebody's political gains. One of the great reforms that must be implemented, it should have been implemented during the GNU, would have been to make sure that the ordinary Zimbabwean is given the right to land. This is the one property that would mean so much to so many ordinary Zimbabweans. And they don't have to wait for it and prove their political allegiance to anyone to have to enjoy the right to own the house in which they live. In the rural areas, it could start with the piece of land which we normally call the yard, on which your hut or house is built. So that piece of land plus the house or the hut, you must get title deeds to that. How the rest of the land, in terms of the fields and the grazing areas, is to be cut up, can be worked out. But this would not have taken 45, 43 years and counting to work out. People like the late John Roberts had already worked it out. And I'm sure if people had the political will, they could dig up his proposal, polish it up, and implement it. The right to own the house, the title deeds to the house in which you live in, should be one of the first rights to be granted to every Zimbabwean, because this is the one right that will mean so much to most Zimbabweans today. And it is totally unacceptable that it is being used to entice and blackmail so many people. If you don't vote for ZANU PF, you don't have the title deeds. These title deeds were promised last year and they were being delayed for one excuse after another. And they should not be extended to only airports, they should be extended to all the urban centers and then on to the rural areas. People should be able to say, this is my property, this is my house. You don't have the right to come here. No one should be able, without due um, process, to say to somebody, you cannot live in that house, you must move. This is the barbarism that we had and people fought against to end during the white colonial regime. Alas, it is still being practiced in Zimbabwe. We can end it. And I think the only sure way of ending this madness is to make sure that the 2023 elections are declared null and void. ZANU PF does not get the political legitimacy to rule the country. Let's go back to the GNU as in as happened in 2008. The only subtle difference is the new GNU must implement all the democratic reforms. That way, we will have a clean slate on which to build our democracy, a healthy and functioning democracy, in which the rights of the individual, the freedoms, are at the very foundation of it. We cannot trust ZANU-PF to implement these reforms. And clearly, we cannot trust MDC slash Triple C to implement these reforms. If Triple C wanted to implement the reforms, they should have done so. They had the opportunity to do so during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. They failed to implement even one meaningful reform. We want 2023 elections to be declared null and void. And the surest way of making sure that is done is for every Zimbabwean out there to start denouncing these flawed and illegal elections. Now, we should not wait for the day after the election is done and the results start coming out. It will be too late. The denunciation must be done now. We must denounce this flawed and illegal process because it is flawed, because it is um, illegal. ZANU-PF has failed to produce even something as basic as a verified voters roll. 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora have been denied the right to vote. That's ZANU-PF cherry picking. ZANU-PF has spent billions of US dollars bribing officials, including the headman and village chiefs for the sake of frog marching, particularly the rural voters who vote for the party. How can such a process produce a legitimate government? We can force this process to be condemned so that we can implement the reforms, so that every Zimbabwean can have basic fundamental rights, including the right to the title deeds to the house in which you live in. This should not be a privilege for ZANU PF supporters only. It should be a right for every Zimbabwean to enjoy and to feel secure, regardless of their political affiliations. That is what we should be aiming for, and it is within our reach to get it if we really put our minds to it. That process must start now. There was nothing to celebrate in April. The big song and dance with people getting chicken in from ZANU PF, wearing ZANU PF t shirts as if it is a ZANU PF privilege. It's not. It is a basic fundamental right for everyone, regardless of your political affiliation. And it should be extended to every urban dweller and to everyone in the rural areas. And to have taken 43 years to do this, it's a crying shame. It's tragic that we've allowed ourselves to be so abused for all these years. This must stop. Food for thought. Thank you very much and good night.